Okay. It's recording now, right?
Yeah, it started. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We will start with one very common thing in interviews. We use relational databases. We were using relational databases quite heavily earlier, but then there was NoSQL moment where people migrated from SQL databases, relational databases to NoSQLs. But now I think the trend is coming back where people are again going to relational databases for various reasons. That's a different topic. But now let us just consider this area. How as a Java developer you connect to the relational databases and then do your stuff. There are different approaches. I'm not going behind the frameworks, because if you go behind the framework, there are plenty. You won't probably reach it. But if you look at underlying approaches, each framework follows into any of the 4 approaches. In fact, there are only 3. Now there is a new one that is added. That is what we are going to discuss today. Bottom line, if you write a Java program, and you want to connect to, say, for example, Oracle or Postgres, there is only one way that you can connect. Whether you come from Hibernate or you come from MyBatis, you come from Spring Boot, ultimately they can all connect through JDBC only. JDBC is the bottommost standard. Okay, so you can make your JDBC connection. In a JDBC world, you will make your connection, prepare the statements, execute the statements, map the result set, close your resources. So this is there for a long time. Even today you can do it, because underlying there is still JDBC. JDBC also evolved over the period of time. But the problem is we may not use this directly in our applications, for the reason being that databases are so sensitive. If you do not close your resources specifically, then it might get into connection leakage and all those problems. And apart from that, this particular step, mapping a result set, from result set you are mapping it to your POJO object. You will have object oriented way, but the result set will be tabular format. You need to do a lot of conversion, and that's quite heavy. If you are doing it a lot of coding, it will be difficult. That's why JDBC is not preferred. So this is approach number 1. Is there anybody using this approach in real time? There are still people who are really concerned about performance and all those stuff. So they are using it, but widely this is not used. But it's still a very good approach actually. That's one. But the interesting thing is, if you are using frameworks and tools, these frameworks and tools can be classified into broader level. Three categories. One, SQL mappers. But before SQL mappers, the most widely used one are ORM mappers. And then there are SQL mappers, and then there are streams based. This is newly added. Okay, now let us look at ORM mapper. In Java, this ORM mappers, ORM is a generic term where if you are coming from an object-oriented world, that is C#, C++, or Java, they are object-oriented language. They see things as objects. What we call a class, relational database call it as a table. What we call an object, relational database call it as a row. What we call a property or a field, that is being called in relational database as a column. Okay, that is how the mapping. So they all work with that mindset. So table is mapped to class, then an row is mapped to an object, property, not property, column is mapped to property. Okay.
Now instead of saying row, shall we say instance of an object, or
object? Okay, object is instance.
Yeah, okay, fine. Just
okay. Yes, perfect. Okay. So now there are some critics against these approaches. They were really strong earlier, but now they are not there because of the flexibility that these ORM platforms provide. It's ease of development. People don't complain that much. But then the bottom line is, relational databases are not all about tables, rows, and columns. They have a lot of other things to offer. Stored procedures, types, packages, there are plenty. But then people consider that coming into ORM, or in our Java case, we call it as a JPA. JPA is a spec for implementing ORM frameworks, Java Persistence API. So people complain if they are really good in relational databases, they will say, okay, they hide many of the features that the relational databases provide, but still they exist. The reason being, these JPAs, once you do this mapping, right, the out of the box, what they provide is they manage your connection. not just manage your connection, they manage your cache. They manage your offline transactions. When I say offline transactions, if you are doing, say for example, booking, it goes across multiple tables and you don't want to commit till the last moment, you can do some magics where you can do all your transactions within your JVM as much as possible and hit your databases only when it is required. Basically, they are offloading your databases effectively. There is no question whether they on this. They do a fantastic job in this. Okay, but now we will consider that a little later. What is the shortcoming? But then SQL mappers. SQL mappers takes this in a different way. In object mapper, it is objects. It's like tables that are mapped. In SQL mappers, they consider in a different way. They consider, okay, guys, don't consider ultimately it's a table, but you execute SQL statements, right? Let me map SQL statements. They map your SQL statements. And every time you make an SQL statement, it goes, and then when it comes across, result sets are mapped to your objects. The mostly widely used frameworks here is, if you are not from Spring background, this guy is there for quite some time. It's an excellent framework. Mybatis is there for quite some time. People who started with Hibernate earlier, they might consider Mybatis looks very simple. In fact, that's a beauty. Mybatis is very simple. It will not hide anything. All that they do is they will manage your connections. They will manage your statements. They will make sure that these queries that we write are externalized to an XML file, where your database developer have full authority to come and optimize, fine tune your queries. And all that they do is they will do these two parts. They map your SQL statements, they map your result set. And if you are coming from Spring, then most probably you will be using Spring JDBC. And nowadays you see more people coming from this JPA to JDBC. I will tell you the reason also. So the reason being, now here, these features that they were provided, are they relevant today? Not exactly. The reason being, when these technologies were invented, relational databases were the only databases that we were using predominantly. The question was between whether you are using Oracle or MySQL. That was the question. It's not between whether you are using relational database or MongoDB. And that is the time that these technologies came into picture. But nowadays we live in a world where this caching is taken care by your infrastructure. Spring takes care of caching, Quarkus takes care of caching. And then you most probably work with polyglot persistence, where you might have a relational database management, RDBMS behind the screen, and you might have a document server, for example, MongoDB, and you might have an operation that cuts across both, which means it's a polyglot transaction, right? In order to manage polyglot transactions, there are a lot of other tools also. They will help you for that. So this offline transactions is no longer relevant today. So that's why people see that, okay, this is quite a bit heavy. But this topic that I wanted to cover, because of our previous week session where Raghavan mentioned this, there are some real great frameworks that has come, but still people stick with JPS for many reasons. This is what he meant actually. Okay, now coming to the third and interesting part, streams based. After Java 8, we know that there are lambda expressions, there are streams. Now, if you consider your natural mapping of your databases, it might be streams. Because if you consider your table, if your table is a stream, what the streams is provide? Stream provide operations, right? Stream provide operations. Now consider your select query and then your where classes. They are nothing but, for example, if you have a stream of employee table, you open a stream and then you do operations like filter, nothing but your where class, map, nothing but your result maps, mapping, and then say, for example, count is nothing but your count query. They look much natural to the way that you look at databases. And this approach will suffice even if you are using NoSQL databases, where you just connect to a collection, make a stream out of it, you do your filter operation, you do your mapping operation, you do your consolidation operations, aggregation operations. And that is the place where these kind of frameworks come into picture. There are many people that are coming with new frameworks in this area, but one matured area that you can see is there is a framework called JOOQ. I think this is the framework that Raghavan mentioned last week. And what JOOQ does is, they try to abstract your SQLs and make sure it's natural if you're coming from a Java background. So now I'll just show you the snippet, small snippet. For example, this is how they consider. So if it is a select statement like this, in a type safe way, this can be expressed like this. And they do all the heavy lifting of going to talking to your database, abstracting your database complexities, and then they give you the results. And this is the third approach. So you can, this is the fourth approach. So now I'm just recollecting. So these are all the approaches that we can do today. One is plain JDBC approaches. It is still relevant. Independent of any approaches that you follow, they all are executed with JDBCs. And first one is Wara mappers, and that's the place where we talk about JPAs. And then there are SQL mappers. That is a place where we have MyBatis at JDBC. And then the streams-based approaches. You can take a case study as this JOOQ. One interview question that many people will get it wrong is, I myself asked this question, many people, what is the difference between Jpa and Hibernate? And people say, okay, Jpa is kind of one standard way of integrating, and then Hibernate is also kind of integrating with an entity framework. But if you really want to answer it properly, Hibernate is, Jpa is a spec, Hibernate is an implementation. So they are same, one in other way. Actually, that's one thing that people get it wrong. That's about the broad, high-level approaches that we follow. So don't choose your framework. Choose your approach first. What approach fits for you, and then choose the technology.
Satish, sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, this question I have from long, like a Jpa and Hibernate. Jpa is specification, Hibernate is an implementation. If you go with the Spring Jpa, in that one, similar to Hibernate, Spring people implemented similar to that one based on Jpa specification, or how it will be?
Okay. Who asked this question?
This is Narayan Satish.
Narayana, thanks a lot for this question, because I find it hard to explain it to people. Once I asked this question, okay, are you using Hibernate or Spring? Even yesterday, there was one person that got it entirely wrong actually in the interview. They said, no, I'm not using Hibernate. I'm using Spring JPA. Okay. Spring is an umbrella project. It will not do the implementation for you. It's just an umbrella. And behind the hood, Spring depends on many of the frameworks. For example, for database migration, it will use Flyway, but it will abstract you. Similarly, Spring's default JPA implementation under the hood uses Hibernate. If you want to confirm, just open your dependency once you create the project. I will try to show one project. Bear with me for some time. I just want to, it's a good question, so it deserves the clear-cut answers. I don't know whether I have that project now. Let me just check it. So when you use this IDEs, right, just have the habit of going and checking your dependencies, because Spring provides a lot of dependencies under the hood, which we may not know under directly in the pom.xml, but it is good to look into that. Okay, I think I don't have it. It's somebody else. Okay. Maybe I'll tell you one thing. You just check this external libraries and dependencies. If you use JPA, Hibernate will be here. So under the hood, it is Hibernate that runs your query, Narayana.
In that case, sorry. In that case, my second question is: suppose Spring with Hibernate is there. So why they are coming with once again? If I need to use Spring with Hibernate, I will use starter, Hibernate starter. I will use it. Similarly, Spring with JPA is there. So that is long back. I have a question: how they are implemented? Is there
okay? To get it clearly, right? Just consider this case. For a moment, let us not get into Hibernate. Okay, there are, okay. If you are coming from a Spring background, you have two options. You can use Spring JPA starter, or you can use Spring JDBC starter. That's all.
Oh, Hibernate is not there.
No, I'm coming to this. Okay, if you are using Spring JPA starter, go and check your dependencies. Okay, you will use repository in Spring, right? Repository, CRED repository.
Yes.
Under the hood, how repository works is it depends on your Hibernate. You can check it and then confirm it.
Okay,
So
okay.
when you say Spring Jpa, you mean Spring Hibernate actually. You mean Spring Hibernate. You can choose your implementation. By default, implementation is Hibernate only. In ORM, Hibernate is one of the most matured thing. There are some other things earlier, like there is EJB, there were some other entity frameworks also, but the most matured one is Hibernate.
Yeah, top link, Ibatis, and Eclipse links.
Wait. Let us be very clear. Top link and MyBatis are different. MyBatis comes into this area, JDBC area, JDBC mapper, SQL mappers.
Oh, okay.
SQL mapper. Hibernate. There was one from Eclipse.
Oracle is there, top link.
Maybe top link.
Oracle, top link.
Correct. Top link. Top link is JP only. Top link. And there was
And
one
Eclipse links are also there.
Eclipse had one thing.
Uh,
Okay, these are all comes into JPA ORM category.
Oh, that this one, MyBati, this one.
SQL mapper side, Spring JDBC, MyBatis. These are all this one. In fact, if you get deeper into this area, okay, I have SQL mappers and both Spring as well as Spring JDBC as well as Spring MyBatis starter is also there in SQL. That is integration. Okay, now you can ask this question: why should I use Spring JDBC or Spring MyBatis? This is highly opinionated. Okay, but let me tell you, there is a small difference between these two frameworks also. Okay, now in MyBatis case, you use XMLs quite heavily, where you mention your dependencies. Right. Mention your mapping. That is, if you want to get the result set and then put it to your employee object, you will use XMLs. Okay, but in JDBC, you will write something called row mappers.
Okay.
Okay, now there is a difference if you understand this clearly. Okay, now if you are using XML, someone has to do the job of getting it and then passing it to the Java object, right? So for that, MyBatis uses reflections. Okay, but row mapper is your own implementation. Okay, now the difference is there. Reflection is usually slower. If you're using row mapper, it will be faster. And that is why in some cases Spring JDBC might be. So if someone asks what is the difference between MyBatis and Spring JDBC, MyBatis uses reflection, but Spring expects you to write the code. That is actually good because it will be faster. But again, it depends on your
follow-up question. That one, sorry. If that is the case, Hibernate also is using a reflection only. You see, nowadays we are using annotations. Before that, if I am 6, 7 years back, we are using like mapping.xml. There we are configuring. There also internally it's use a reflection and it will create the objects, right?
Correct. Now this reflection part, right? Reflection is there for a long time. Frameworks use them quite heavily, but reflection has its own limitation also. The new frameworks that we come, right? Instead of using reflection, they use something called proxy classes.
Okay.
Okay, let us take a very simple logical perspective. Okay, now if I'm giving an XML and in which I'm saying that my column, say for example, column name act underscore ID should be mapped to property name, say for example, actor ID. Actor ID. Okay, consider this is your statement. Now, what will reflection do? It will read it at the runtime, convert this and then put it. Okay, but just consider logically, I am making this decision well within my compilation time, right? In the compilation itself, my intention is to do this. What happens if you can create a class or a mapper method like this in the compile time, actor dot set actor ID, if it is result set dot get act underscore ID. And then I find a way to load this class behind the screen when I package the jar or when I start the jar file. It's a compile time itself, I'm deciding it, right? So during runtime, it will be faster. And this is what you can do with proxy classes. So Hibernate, if I understand correctly, I'm not sure, I need to cross verify it, but frameworks are slowly coming out of reflection and try to do as much as possible with dynamic proxies. It might be correct that Hibernate was using reflection earlier, but I don't think it uses it quite heavily nowadays.
Okay.
Did I answer the question, Narayana?
Yes. Thank you, Satish.
Okay. Any other? Okay. There are. Sovik, any other questions? That Akshay's question is, JOOQ comes under SQL mapper, right? Can't be Akshay. We can't say that they are SQL mappers directly. You can call it like stream based mappers. They take it one level higher, right? They map your streams. Yeah, Sanjay's question is, but they create proxy using reflection. There are various techniques, Sanjay. You can create it with dynamic class loading also. I need to check that. There are libraries like CGlib. There is something called ByteBuddy. So they do it during your compile time or startup.
मेरा भी धोना है यार ठीक है
No, that's not reflection. You can't say that it's a reflection, right? Because you're loading the.
वहाँ पे घर पे भी तुम हाथे से धो सकता है ना हाँ धो के खा ठीक है
Okay, that's not reflection, right, Sanjay? Sanjay, you can mute if you want. That's not reflection, right? Because you're loading it during the build time. You are creating a class, compilable class, and then loading it. In fact, this is the magic that happens for your repository also. For repository, you define only interface. At runtime, Spring creates one class for that. Maybe I don't think I will cover this dynamic practice sometime. Maybe I will ask one of the other speakers to cover that also in detail. Any other questions?